And for me, the most emotional moment of my visit to Denmark was laying a wreath at the memorial to the Danes who served, fought, and died alongside Americans. So when our president says we never asked for anything from NATO, and they never gave us anything.
The exchange centers on U.S. military action, the constitutional role of Congress, and the importance of maintaining trust with America's allies. The discussion highlights concerns about transparency, war powers, and the long-term consequences of foreign policy decisions made without full consultation.
I'll agree with all of my colleagues. Nicolás Maduro's a bad guy. He was indicted. There was a bounty on his head over several administrations. His removal, flawlessly executed by American troops, thankfully none of them hurt, did cost the lives of 75 to 100 Venezuelans and Cubans, was a dangerous and high-risk maneuver. I am glad that it ended as well as it possibly could. But the point here that I want to make first is that it was rehearsed for months. The administration had a number of contingencies it was trying to navigate through. But over the course of months, when the administration was taking strike after strike after strike against drug trafficking boats, in several instances where senior leaders of the administration briefed this committee and others, we were told that military action to remove Maduro was not on the table, that the campaign to try and deter drug trafficking was not going to include the exact military action that followed. Yet it was being rehearsed. If there was time to practice, there was time to consult. And consulting with Congress is not just some high-minded principle, not some abstract thing, not a nice to have. It's a got to have. And look, the chairman opened by saying that this was limited in scope and duration, that it was executed flawlessly, and we should all be happy about the result. That much I agree with. But our president continues to threaten Delcy Rodriguez and the remnant of the Maduro regime with military force if they don't comply. We should know what are the policies, what is the path, what is the plan forward. You and I both know the long and painful history of wars that began and seemed to be resolved and then opened up into excruciating, expensive, years-long conflicts. In Iraq in particular, in Libya and elsewhere, things do not always go as planned. And so consultation with Congress that is truthful and forthcoming and transparent is critical. In your service in this body, you knew that, you experienced it. I was in the room as you held to account members of previous administrations for not coming forward as they should have. So look, in order to avoid our men and women in our armed forces going into harm's way, doubting whether they have the support of the Congress, consultation, hearings, and deliberations are required. I understand the risk of leaks. That's a risk every administration takes. But at the end of the day, our framers entrusted the power of the declaration of war to this body, not to the executive. And where there is the time to consult, there has to be consultation. Second, I just wanted to talk about allies and alliances. I was just in Europe. I led a bipartisan delegation, as Senator Shaheen referenced, to Denmark. And our president's comments about NATO, about Denmark, and his attempts to coerce Denmark into giving up Greenland are appalling. They profoundly harmed our security. And I am asking you to do everything you can to reinforce our commitment to NATO. I was concerned that you just said NATO needs to be reimagined. Let's just be clear about the record. You know as well as I, Article 5 has only been invoked once, and it was in defense of us after we were attacked. Danes and soldiers from almost every other NATO ally deployed and served, fought, and died. 52 days. And for me, the most emotional moment of my visit to Denmark was laying a wreath at the memorial to the Danes who served, fought, and died alongside Americans. So when our president says we never asked for anything from NATO, and they never gave us anything, and you suggest that they aren't carrying their weight, whether it's in bases or in access or in troops or in service, it is allies that will keep us safe in the Indo-Pacific. Our treaty allies, Korea and Japan and Australia and the Philippines, are going to be critical to Indo-Pacific security against our principal threat, China. And in Europe, I'm worried that the very foundations of trust are being shaken. Our democracy depends on consultation with Congress that is truthful and timely, And the confidence of our allies depends on them knowing where we're going next. Today, an armada is steaming towards Iran. Our president is on social media threatening Iran. And I hope I can count on you, Mr. Secretary, to consult with us and inform us before our next actions, whether against Nigeria, Colombia, Cuba, Iran, or anywhere else. And I hope and believe that I can count on you to reinforce the sanctity of NATO, not to reimagine it, but to reinforce it.
Senator Coons makes it clear that congressional oversight is not optional when the United States uses military force. He acknowledges that the operation against Nicolás Maduro was carried out successfully and that American troops completed a dangerous mission. At the same time, he stresses that success does not excuse the failure to fully and honestly consult Congress. Coons points out that this operation was rehearsed for months, which means there was ample time to brief lawmakers in advance. When Congress is told that military action is not being considered, while preparations are quietly underway, it damages trust between the branches of government and weakens democratic accountability. Coons also warns that limited military actions often do not stay limited. He reminds viewers of past conflicts such as Iraq and Libya, where early confidence gave way to long, costly, and painful wars. His message is that lawmakers are not only entitled to know what has already happened, but also what comes next. He presses for clarity on long-term policy, future risks, and the broader strategy. Without that transparency, small operations can slowly expand into prolonged conflicts that were never fully debated or authorized by Congress. Another major concern Coons raises is the responsibility owed to U.S. service members. He emphasizes that men and women in uniform deserve to know that their missions are backed by full congressional awareness and support. Consultation, hearings, and briefings are not political theater. They are part of making sure troops are not sent into harm's way without proper oversight and shared responsibility. Coons acknowledges the risk of leaks, but he argues that this risk does not justify cutting Congress out of the process when there is time to consult. Coons also focuses heavily on America's alliances, especially NATO. He speaks from personal experience visiting Europe and highlights the sacrifices made by U.S. allies. He reminds listeners that NATO's collective defense commitment was invoked to defend the United States after September 11th, and that Allied soldiers, including Danish troops, fought and died alongside Americans. By pointing to these sacrifices, Coons stresses that allies are not freeloaders. They are partners who have paid real costs in shared missions. He warns that rhetoric questioning NATO or suggesting that allies are not carrying their weight risks damaging trust that took decades to build. He connects this issue to broader global security, including challenges in the Indo-Pacific. Coons explains that strong alliances with countries such as Japan, South Korea, Australia, and the Philippines are critical to countering threats, particularly from China. These relationships depend on reliability and confidence. When U.S. commitments appear uncertain or inconsistent, it can weaken cooperation and encourage adversaries to test limits. Coons makes the case that strong alliances are a strategic necessity, not a burden. Coons also raises concern about rising tensions in multiple regions, including Iran and other countries where U.S. military involvement could grow. He urges that Congress be informed before further actions are taken. His message is not about blocking the president from responding to real emergencies. It is about making sure that when time allows, Congress is part of decisions that could lead to wider conflict. He argues that this process helps prevent mistakes and reduces the risk of unintended escalation. Through his remarks, Coons reinforces that foreign policy is not only about tactical success. It is about trust, constitutional responsibility, and long-term stability. He makes clear that meaningful consultation with Congress and respect for alliances are essential to protecting U.S. interests. Ignoring these principles may produce short-term results, but it also increases the risk of repeating past errors that led to costly and prolonged conflicts. His message centers on accountability, transparency, and the belief that shared decision-making strengthens both U.S. democracy and U.S. security.